What if your first period didn't mean womanhood, but a prison sentence, in my family? Bleeding meant you belonged to a man 3 times your age, until I ran, exposed them all, and started a war they still haven't won. I was never supposed to survive girlhood. In our home, your value didn't lie in your dreams or your kindness or the hours you spent helping your little siblings with homework. No, in our home, the first sign of blood didn't mean you were growing up. It meant you were ready to be sold. By the time you turned 13, maybe 14 if you were lucky, you were property. Not a daughter, not a person, just a womb that needed occupying. The only question was which man would pay the price. The older, the richer, the better. I grew up thinking that was normal. I truly did. Until I watched my cousin Mayam, bright-eyed and barely 12, get promised to a man older than her father just 3 days after her first period. He'd already buried 2 wives by the time he showed up with gold and a smile that never reached his eyes. We were told the wives had died of kidney failure. We whispered it was from too many pregnancies. Too young, too fast. That night, something inside me broke. I didn't throw a tantrum. I didn't scream. That wouldn't have helped. I did something far more calculated. I stopped eating. Not because I wanted to die. Because I wanted to delay. I'd noticed something the thinner girls in our family, the ones who didn't have enough body fat, were always the last to get their periods. If my body could delay the blood, maybe I could delay the wedding. Delay becoming another ghost story whispered at midnight. The other girls started calling me skeleton. I let them, because I had a plan. I was starving myself, not out of self-hatred, but out of survival. It didn't stop my training. Of course, wife prep was a ritual. Every Friday, like clockwork, I was made to serve meals to the men in our family, from 1 a.m. to 10 a.m., on my feet, without speaking, without looking them in the eye. One glance too high, one clang of a plate, and I'd earn 10 lashes for my father's belt. I was taught to carry burning pots with my bare hands so I could toughen up for future kitchen duties. They'd smile when I winced, told me pain made a girl useful. Every night, my mother would smear skin whitening cream across my face, promising it would make me beautiful enough to fetch a better price. I played the part. I smiled. I said all the right things. I told them I wanted lots of babies. I practiced my cooking. I kept quiet. By 14, I was still periodless, still technically safe, but beginning to understand that safety was temporary. That's when fate gave me a gift. It came in the shape of a locked drawer, forgotten open by a teacher at school who saw too much. I'd worn a t-shirt that day, accidentally revealing how thin I'd become. She pulled me aside for a conversation, then left for the restroom, leaving her drawer slightly ajar. Inside were pamphlets, books. One said, "Your rights as a minor." Another, "When culture becomes crime." I stared at them like they were forbidden fruit. They weren't written for girls like me, or so I thought, but something in me needed to know. I stole the thinnest one and hid it in my waistband. I read it in the dark, long after my family had gone to bed, memorized every word, discovered that child marriage wasn't just unfair, it was illegal, learned what CPS stood for, learned about mandatory reporters, teachers, doctors, counselors, all legally bound to act if a kid said the right words. And then I started teaching, not in school, of course, in my uncle's tool shed, behind the stacks of paint buckets and broken lawn chairs. 6 cousins joined me, all girls. None of them had bled yet. All of them terrified. I taught them how to whisper the magic phrase to the right adult. "They're making me marry. I'm only 13. Please help." I didn't know then that those whispered words would be the first blow in a war that would tear my family in two. When the blood finally came, it felt like betrayal. It happened early one morning while I was preparing food in the kitchen, the smell of garlic and oil already thick in the air. I felt it trickling down my leg, slow and hot, soaking the white cotton dress they made me wear on Fridays. I looked down and saw the red blooms spreading across the fabric, and I knew I was no longer a girl. I was now a commodity. I didn't scream, but my mother did. The second she saw it, her cry of joy echoed through the house like a wedding bell. Within moments, a flood of women rushed into the kitchen. Aunts, cousins, neighbors, all smiling, all congratulating me like I just won something precious. They kissed my cheeks. They called me blessed. They told me how lucky I was. By nightfall, my father had chosen a man, Hamid Habibi. He was a construction mogul, wealthy, respected, feared. He'd also buried 2 wives before they turned 23. Kidney failure, the certificates claimed. But the whispers said something different. Too many pregnancies, too little rest, and a man who saw wives as disposable tools. I was to become wife number 3. That same night, another cousin, Anna, one of the girls from my secret shed group, got her first period too, and within hours, she was promised to a man with 8 children, older than our uncles, a man who collected wives like furniture and discarded them when they broke. I watched Anna's eyes go hollow as they negotiated her bride price over tea and pistachios. Her body was there, but her soul had already retreated. Later that night, I found her hiding in the tool shed, rocking back and forth on her heels. I didn't say much. Just handed her my notebook, the one where I'd copied down every emergency shelter address, every hotline, every legal loophole I'd memorized by candlelight. It was the blueprint, our invisible map to freedom. "Tomorrow," I whispered, voice shaking. "You go to the science teacher. Tell her exactly what I taught you. No variations. Use the words that trigger a report." Her fingers trembled as she took the notebook. "What about you? My wedding's not for 2 weeks. I lied. I'll figure something out. But I was wrong. That very night, there was a knock at our front door. Not a quiet knock, an official one. It was CPS. They said someone had filed a concern about Anna, that there were allegations about underage engagements. They needed to speak to all the girls under 18 in the household." My father's face changed in an instant. He wore confusion like a costume, then rage like a second skin. He knew. Someone had talked. Someone had taught these girls something as... The house became a frenzy. Accusations flew. Whispers turned to snarls. I could feel their suspicions circling like vultures over a carcass. It took less than an hour for them to find the notebook, the original, the one I kept hidden in the back of the shed behind the rusted toolbox. They opened it like a weapon had been discovered. It was filled with laws, phone numbers, emergency scripts, legal terms in English and Arabic. It was everything I'd spent years gathering. And they saw it as a virus. My father didn't yell that time. He gathered the entire family. Then, in front of them all, he burned my notebook in the fire pit. He didn't even look at me when he spoke, just stared into the flames and said, in a voice colder than steel, "This one is diseased, contaminated, a cancer." Then he turned to the crowd and declared, "The wedding is tomorrow, before she infects anyone else." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay still in bed, watching the ceiling fan spin shadows across my walls, counting down the hours to my execution in red and gold, but I'd already prepared for this moment. I had a bag hidden in the bathroom ceiling, packed days ago, just in case. And when dawn came, I was ready to run. The footsteps came just after sunrise, slow, steady, deliberate. They moved down the hallway like a countdown I could feel in my chest. I was curled on the floor, pretending to be too sick to stand, one hand pressed against my stomach and the other gripping the hidden plastic bag beneath my nightgown. I'd rehearsed this a dozen times in my head, the fake pain, the limp, the desperation that wasn't quite fake anymore. When the doorknob finally turned, I let out a groan and twisted my body with just enough drama to sell the illusion. My mother stepped inside, dressed head to toe in shimmering red and gold, her hair pinned perfectly, her hands trembling just slightly, not with concern, but with fury. "Get up," she ordered. "The beautician arrives in 30 minutes. I whimpered, pressing harder on my stomach. "Something's wrong. Mama, it hurts." She frowned, cautious now. In our culture, a sick bride was a cursed bride, a bad omen, bad luck. And if there was one thing my mother feared more than shame, it was bad luck on a wedding day. "What did you eat?" "Nothing. I swear." I gasped. "Please, I need the bathroom." She grabbed my arm, cold and firm. "You just went 20 minutes ago. I feel like I'm going to throw up." She hesitated, disgust warring with superstition. Finally, she let go. 5 minutes, she said. "The aunties are waiting." I stumbled down the hall, clutching my stomach, clutching the bag, and locked the bathroom door behind me. My heart was racing so loud I thought they'd hear it through the walls. There was no time for fear now. I climbed onto the toilet seat, hands reaching up to the ceiling tile I'd loosened weeks ago. It shifted easily. The bag went in first. I flushed the toilet, ran the tap, made all the right noises to keep up the ruse, then groaned loudly again. "Mama!" I called out through the door. "I can't stop. Something's wrong. Pounding fists. Open this door now, I can't," I cried, standing back on the toilet, reaching up to the small square window. It was meant for ventilation, painted shut years ago, but I'd been working on it every morning for months with a butter knife stolen from the kitchen. And now, the paint cracked. A sliver of morning air slipped through. Footsteps gathered outside. More voices. They were getting impatient. "She's taking too long," my father's voice boomed. "Break it down!" I shoved the bag out the window first. Then I pulled myself up, my shoulders scraping the frame, my hips catching. I twisted, gritted my teeth, forced myself through. Just as the bathroom door splintered open behind me, my legs cleared the window. I fell 6 feet onto wet grass, landing hard, ankle twisting. Pain shot through my foot, but nothing broke. I didn't give myself time to feel it. I ran, barefoot, nightgown flapping like a flag of surrender. I cut across our yard, over the fence, into the neighbor's lawn. Dogs barked. Motion lights flared. I kept running. Our neighborhood was a labyrinth, row after row of identical houses filled with people who looked like me, who knew my parents, who would return me without question. I didn't care. I sprinted past the Hassan's shed, through the Mahmoud's backyard, across the Sal's vegetable garden. Somewhere behind me, car engines roared to life. They were chasing me. Headlights swept the street. I dove behind garbage bins. I heard Omar's voice, angry and close. "Check every street. She can't have gone far." The bus stop was 4 blocks away. I'd mapped the path in my head 100 times, but never barefoot, never bleeding, never with glass cutting into my heel. My cousin Kareem's voice came from the left. A car skidded around the corner. I ducked into rose bushes, thorns tearing my skin, praying the woman who owned the house, Mrs. Chin, wouldn't recognize me. She wasn't from our community. Maybe she'd look away. I burst into the alley behind her house, heart pounding, legs shaking. And then the bus appeared, right on time. I sprinted for it, waving wildly. The driver, a kind-looking black woman, took one look at me, torn nightgown, bloodied feet, and held the door. I stepped on board, then froze. No money. Panic slammed into me. The $20 I'd hidden. I'd left it in the bag. My only escape. And I couldn't pay. Please, I whispered, just downtown. I'll pay you back, I swear. An elderly woman near the front stood, pressed exact change into the machine, then turned to me with soft eyes. Sit downtown, child, she said, patting the seat beside her. She didn't ask questions. She just handed me a tissue as the bus pulled away, and Omar's car screeched into the parking lot behind us. I ducked low, but not before I saw his face, twisted with fury. Betrayed. Afraid. The woman beside me shifted slightly, as if shielding me from view, and for the first time in my life, I felt the first breath of freedom. Downtown felt like another universe, one where time moved slower. The air pressed heavier, and nobody knew my name. The moment I stepped off that bus, barefoot and bleeding, I felt both invisible and exposed. Oh, like the whole city could see straight through me, and yet none of them had any idea what I'd just escaped from. The courthouse stood ahead of me like a monument carved out of silence and indifference, tall, cold, sterile. I walked through the doors without stopping to think, gripping the folded piece of paper in my hand, the one thing tethering me to the idea of survival. Inside, the marble floor gleamed under fluorescent lights, my dirty footprints streaking the surface like proof that I didn't belong here. The security guards looked at me, not unkindly, but with the kind of quiet alarm people wear when they don't want to get involved. And then I reached the counter. The woman behind the glass window didn't ask why I looked the way I did. She didn't question the bruises, the torn nightgown, or the thin layer of dried blood on my heels. She came out from behind the desk and spoke gently, her voice soft and level, as though I might break if she raised it even slightly. Do you need medical attention? Sweetheart? I shook my head, though every step throbbed. Emergency protective order. I whispered. I'm 15. They're trying to marry me off today. She didn't flinch. Just nodded and pulled out the forms, asking for the shelter address I'd memorized weeks ago like it was the Lord's Prayer. I gave it to her, even as my stomach tightened. What if there was no space? What if I'd run this far just to be told there was nowhere left to run? My phone buzzed again, soft at first, then insistent. Dozens of missed calls. My mother, my father, Omar. Numbers I didn't recognize. I didn't need to listen to the voicemails to know what they said. I knew the script by heart. Shame, dishonor, betrayal, that I was dead to them now, that I had brought ruin. The clerk took my paperwork and disappeared into the back. A few moments later, she returned with a judge. He didn't smile, didn't ask questions, just read through the pages carefully and then signed his name with quiet finality. Granted, he said. Emergency order, effective immediately. Full hearing in 2 weeks. The relief didn't come right away. I'd expected it to crash over me like a wave, but instead, I just stood there, hollow and still, clutching the signed document like it was a fragile thing that could be taken back at any second. I left the courthouse and started walking, slow and unsure, my feet burning, every step leaving behind a tiny smear of blood. The shelter was 12 blocks away, and I barely made it 3 before I found a bench and called the number I'd written down weeks ago. We're full, the woman on the other end said, her voice apologetic but unmoved. We can place you on the Thursday wait list. Thursday, 3 days away, no place to sleep, no plan, and nowhere else to turn, until a name surfaced in my memory like a life raft. Ms. Rodriguez, the teacher, the drawer, the pamphlet. It took 3 buses and over 2 hours to reach Jefferson High, but her car was there, parked in the side lot, right where I'd hoped it would be. I slipped in through the side entrance, the hallways eerily quiet, my breath echoing against the lockers. Her classroom door was slightly ajar, the scent of ink and red pen and dry erase marker still fresh. When she looked up, her eyes widened, and the pen in her hand hit the desk. She crossed the room in 3 strides. What happened? I tried to speak, but my throat closed. She guided me to a chair, knelt down, and began gently cleaning my feet with the school nurse's kit. Her hands were steady, but her jaw tightened with each wound she uncovered. And just like that, the dam inside me broke. I was supposed to marry him today, I whispered, voice cracking. He's buried 2 wives already. I ran. I got the order, but the shelter's full, and I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. She didn't panic. She didn't freeze. She just picked up her phone. CPS emergency line, she said aloud, as if saying it might make it more real. But the voice on the other end was cautious, clinical. She's 15. Do you have proof of immediate danger? Any visible injuries caused by the parents? She has glass in her feet from running barefoot. Her body is covered in cuts. Self-inflicted during escape isn't enough. We need something from the home. Something recent. My phone buzzed again. Ms. Rodriguez answered. Hello, I could hear his voice from where I sat. Calm. Composed. The voice he used at fundraisers and business meetings. She's mentally unwell. We're just trying to bring her home. She hasn't had her medication. We're very worried about her. She hung up and looked at me with slow horror spreading across her face. They know where you are. I nodded, suddenly numb. They're tracking me. My phone. Delete it all, she said. Standing. Factory reset. Now. And even as I wiped the device, she was already dialing again. Legal aid. Emergency shelters. Social workers. But every voice she reached said the same thing. Without bruises that could be photographed or bones that could be pointed to, there was little anyone could do. And that's when the sound came. Distant but unmistakable. Car doors slamming in the school parking lot. They had arrived. The cars were outside before we even made it to the window. We heard them first, the dull slam of doors, the crunch of tires over gravel, then the unmistakable murmur of voices that didn't belong to teachers, students, or staff. Ms. Rodriguez froze mid-call, lowering her phone slowly, her eyes flicking toward the classroom blinds. They're here, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She didn't argue, just moved to the door, turned the lock, and pulled the shade down with a snap. Then she crossed back to me quickly, crouching beside my chair. We stay quiet. We don't open the door. I'm calling 911. But I stopped her, my hand grabbing hers, not out of panic, but something colder, more calculated because I knew what they'd say, that I was unstable, that I had made it all up, that I was sick and needed to come home. Wait, I said, breath shallow. Let me show you something first. With trembling fingers, I rolled up the sleeves of my nightgown, exposing the small circular burn scars that ran in neat rows down the insides of my forearms. She didn't speak, but her hand tightened around mine. I turned slowly and lifted the back of my gown just enough to reveal the faint belt lines. Some old, faded into my skin like ancient history. Others newer, still purple and swollen. Friday service training, I whispered. If I spoke, if I looked at anyone, if I flinched. Her hands were shaking now as she took photos on her phone, not asking questions, not hesitating, just capturing every mark I showed her. Why didn't you ever say anything, she asked. And all I could do was shake my head. I thought it was normal. I said, voice cracking. Until I read your pamphlets, I didn't know it had a name, that it was abuse. Outside, we heard footsteps, calm at first, then louder, heavier, voices, first in Arabic, then English. We know she's in there. Her phone's here. She's not well. Please, we just want to talk. The handle jiggled, then a knock. Polite? Too polite. Ms. Rodriguez backed away, her face pale. I'm calling 911 now. As she dialed, we heard the voice again. My uncle this time. We brought her medication. She hasn't taken it in days. She's confused. She lies when she's sick. You know how it is. Girls her age. Emotional? But I wasn't sick. And I wasn't confused. I stepped forward, standing beside the locked door like it was the last barrier between my freedom and a cage I'd never escape from again. Check the parking lot cameras, I said urgently, turning to Ms. Rodriguez. I came here alone. If they have medication, they brought it in anticipation. That proves they planned to find me. She nodded and called school security. Within minutes, Mr. Williams, the security officer, confirmed it. The footage showed them arriving with bags in hand. Prescription bottles with my name. My diagnosis. Everything they needed to build a lie. But before help could arrive, the pounding intensified. Not polite anymore. Angry now. Insistent. They're escalating. Ms. Rodriguez whispered, holding her phone with both hands. The police are en route. I backed away as the door shook under the weight of fists and elbows. Then, a new voice. Deeper. Colder. My father's... You've been poisoned, he called out. These people are using you. You're sick, and they're keeping you from us. He switched to Arabic, his tone changing, no longer pleading, now sharp, commanding. I didn't need a translator to know he was giving orders. He was losing control. And I could feel it, the moment everything shifted, because just then, Ms. Rodriguez's laptop chimed. An email. She opened it and gasped. One of my old essays. A backup she had saved without realizing how important it would become. In it, I had written about learning to cook for my future husband, describing in coded language the burns, the beatings, the silence that had swallowed my girlhood whole. She opened another, then another. There it was, in my own words, veiled, but honest, a breadcrumb trail of truth I hadn't even realized I was leaving. Your Honor will want to see this, she whispered, as if rehearsing for court. I nodded, staring at the door, where shadows shifted just beyond the glass. They had come to drag me back. But this time, I wasn't alone. The pounding on the door stopped the moment the sirens came. It was like someone had hit pause on the nightmare. 1 second. The hallway echoed with threats and fists, and the next, silence. That thick, hollow silence of men slipping away when consequences finally catch up to them. From behind the blinds, I watched the retreat. Quick footsteps, a muttered curse in Arabic, the sound of car doors slamming. By the time the police arrived, all that remained was a quiet hallway, and a bottle of fake medication sitting neatly by the classroom door. My father had transformed by then. Gone was the man who'd shouted threats through locked doors. In his place stood a composed figure in a pressed suit, flanked by uncles and cousins dressed like professionals. He greeted the officers with open hands, sorrow in his eyes, and concern dripping from every word. "She's very sick," he explained smoothly. "She hasn't taken her medication. We're just worried. She ran away. We love her very much. The officers split us up. One stayed with me and Ms. Rodriguez, while the others pulled my father and his entourage aside." I could see them talking in hushed tones down the hall, gesturing toward the classroom, toward me, toward the door that had barely held them back. "She's mentally ill." I heard one of them say, "bipolar, possibly schizophrenic, delusional." Ms. Rodriguez didn't flinch. Instead, she pulled out her phone and showed the officer beside us the photos, the burns, the welts, the bruises layered over years. He scrolled through each one in silence. "Cuts like this," he said slowly, "could be self-inflicted. If she was in a state—" I didn't wait for Mrs. Rodriguez to speak. "If I'm so mentally ill," I said, my voice steady, "why haven't I ever been in treatment? No doctor visits, no therapy, no school record of medication?" He blinked, and that's when she opened her laptop. "She's been in my class for 2 years," Ms. Rodriguez said, her tone low but unwavering. "I saved every essay, every quiet confession buried between paragraphs. She never used the words abuse or marriage, but it's all there, if you know what to look for." She showed him the assignments, one after another. An essay about tradition that was really about beatings, a poem about fire in the kitchen that wasn't metaphorical, a journal entry describing Friday rituals, a coded confession of weekly silence, service, and punishment. He read in silence, his brow tightening with each page. Then came the security guard, Mr. Williams, holding his phone up. "The moment they arrived," he said, "they already had her medication in hand. That's premeditated. You don't show up with pills for someone you haven't seen yet unless you're planning a performance." The officer glanced at me again, something changing in his face. It wasn't pity, it was recognition. The mask my family had worn for years was slipping, and the people in this building, people with power, were finally starting to see what I had been trying to say all along. But then I remembered Anna. I turned to Ms. Rodriguez suddenly. "Anna Mansour, my cousin. She made a report too, yesterday. She's the one who triggered CPS." Ms. Rodriguez typed the name fast, searching, scanning, then stopped. "They moved," she said, voice flat. "This morning, no forwarding address. The number's disconnected. They'd taken her, vanished her like she never existed." I didn't cry. I couldn't. But the officer next to me took a step back and said one thing I didn't expect to hear. "We're placing her in emergency protective custody, effective immediately." I closed my eyes, exhaling something that had been trapped in my chest for years. It wasn't over, not even close. But I wasn't going back. Not now, not ever. The ride to the hospital felt strangely quiet. Margaret, the emergency placement officer, sat beside me in the back of the ambulance, her clipboard perched on her knees, her eyes flicking between the road and my face as if waiting for me to shatter. I didn't. Not yet. I had shattered earlier. Now, I was only dust and sharp edges. The paramedic said I'd gotten lucky. The glass in my heel had missed every tendon, though infection was already trying to set in. They gave me antibiotics, cleaned my wounds, wrapped my feet like I was something delicate. I didn't feel delicate. I felt like a fuse still burning toward the end. Margaret was on the phone the whole time, trying to find placement. "Yes, I understand you're full," she said again and again. "No, she can't go to regular foster. She's a high-risk cultural case. She needs a secure location, preferably with someone trained in recovery protocol." Each call ended the same. No space, no beds, no room. Ms. Rodriguez paced outside the curtain, refusing to leave. She'd followed the ambulance in her own car, insisting she'd stay until she knew I had somewhere safe to sleep. Her presence anchored me, even when nothing else did. "There has to be someone," she kept saying. "A safe house, a nurse, a trauma placement. We can't just patch her up and send her into the street." That's when she stopped pacing. Her voice dropped. "Wait," she said quietly, as if remembering something fragile she'd once tucked away for emergencies like this. "I know someone. Retired nurse. Worked with the district. Used to take girls like her in. I think she's still certified." Margaret looked up sharply. "Is she willing to house a cultural case? With risk? I don't know." Ms. Rodriguez replied. "But if anyone can handle this, it's Theodora Whitman." She stepped out into the hallway to make the call, and within 5 minutes, she came back with a quiet nod. She said yes. Margaret didn't hesitate. The moment the discharge paperwork was signed, she called in the address for transport. The drive to Theodora's house was long, nearly 40 minutes outside the city, through winding neighborhoods where the trees grew taller than the fences and the homes had space between them, like boundaries meant to keep stories from colliding. When we arrived, floodlights blinked on above the driveway. Security cameras turned slowly, tracking every movement. And then, the door opened. Theodora stood on the porch, a woman in her early 60s, silver hair braided tight, arms crossed over a cardigan that didn't quite hide the nurse's instincts still flickering in her posture. She didn't smile. Not at first. Just looked me over, top to bottom, as if cataloging every wound, visible or otherwise. "Come in, dear," she said gently. "Let's get you settled." Her house smelled like cinnamon and cedar. Warm, lived in, safe. Nothing like the cold golden marble of my parents' home. She led me down a narrow hallway to a small bedroom painted a soft cream color, where the bed was already made and a nightlight glowed dimly in the corner. "There's a lock on the inside of the door," she said, gesturing to it like a promise. "The windows have sensors. Cameras cover the yard. If anyone tries to come near this house, we'll know." I didn't speak. I didn't need to, because for the first time in years, I wasn't being watched. I was being protected. Ms. Rodriguez stood in the doorway for a moment longer. Then she handed me a card with her personal number written in thick black ink. "Call me," she said. "Any time. Day or night. I don't care if it's 3 a.m. You don't do this alone anymore." She squeezed my hand once, then left quietly. That night, I didn't sleep. Every sound outside sent my body into full alert. Every gust of wind, every branch against the window felt like a footstep, a shadow, a hand reaching for me. So I sat by the window, knees pulled to my chest, staring into the dark. At 3 a.m. Theodora found me like that. She didn't ask why I was awake. She just sat beside me in the second chair, watching the empty street like it was a battlefield we both remembered. "They came for the last girl, too," she said softly. 3 brothers. A father. They stood right at that gate, demanding I return their property. She smiled, but it wasn't sweet. It was steel. The police took less than 2 minutes to get here. I made sure of that. And that was the first time I exhaled. Not from fear, but from something deeper. Trust.